Hello and welcome to this podcast, which is a part of a series called Inventing Embodiment. I'm Simon Ellis and I'm a choreographer and also a researcher at the Centre for Dance Research at Coventry University. So last year, during the first lockdown, my colleagues and I had a series of quite informal conversations, and those conversations, they seem to keep coming back to questions of embodiment, or how it is that we speak about embodiment. And so this podcast is an attempt to capture some of those conversations, or the hearts of those conversations. My guest today is Jonathan Burrows, who's a choreographer and researcher. Welcome, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, and thank you for swapping roles. You were the first person that I spoke to as part of this series, and now this is almost the last one. And it's a real pleasure to reverse the roles and think together in a different way. Yes,
it's nice to get my own back.
Yeah.
So I thought, I guess the easiest thing to do is to hear you talk about what you're currently busy with in terms of your artistic research, and perhaps steer that in some way towards the ways in which embodiment matters to that work.
Yeah, okay. So the work that I'm doing at the moment as a researcher, and in a more academic sense rather than a practice-based sense, has some direct connection to ideas of embodiment, although embodiment is not a word that is coming up within the research. So I'm embarking on something with the Serbian dramaturge and performance theorist Bojana Švejc, where we're using recent models of human perception to try and look differently at what choreography is. So the way in which we're looking differently is that you often hear people first and foremost speaking of choreography as structure, as being to do with structure. And we want to try and look at choreography as a feeling, as a felt sense. And the connection between this idea of choreography as a feeling and new perspectives on human perception is that in the last 15 years or so, a number of people from different disciplines, cognitive philosophy, neuroscience and anthropology in particular, have been questioning what was the old model of human perception, which tends to be called the input-output model. And the input-output model prioritized the sensory as the first place of meeting the world, and that movement through the world was an after effect of meeting the world through the senses.
You mean movement became possible by meeting the... Yes.
Movement became possible and also had an impetus from the sensory. The new perspective, which was pioneered in many ways by the philosopher Alva Noe, who teaches at the University of Berkeley, California, flips that around and comes up with the notion that it is by moving through the world that we encounter the sensory, and that the sensory is then embodied as part of the learnt mapping of the world, to the degree that, for instance, there's another philosopher, Andy Clark, that teaches at Sussex University. And Andy Clark takes that image to the point that he believes that sensory perception becomes something that we have this embodied mapping of the world, and these embodied experiences of the sensory which allow us to remember and then predict, to anticipate what we will meet in the world that has already been mapped and is remembered, such that the way we experience the sensory is deeply connected to memory and is already deeply embodied. So real perception happens only when there's what Andy Clark calls an error in what should have happened according to what we might expect. Yes, in terms of
memory or prediction. It interrupts those things.
Yeah, so this mapping of the world by moving through it, the beautiful and simple example that Alva Noe gives is how a child in the developmental stage learns a rectangle. And Alva Noe says a rectangle is not a singular sensory object or experience, but a rectangle, so imagine your own mobile phone or the wooden block that a child holds is discovered by movement, by a journey from one corner to another corner, and then with the fingers, and then in one corner to another corner, such that the third corner and the fourth corner begin to be anticipated. Oh, and just to say that Alvin Noe is very clear that the eyes are themselves journeying and therefore mapping. And when I came across this information, I recognized something that I felt that I'd been looking for a long time, and that spoke much more strongly to my own experience as a choreographer and a dancer and an improviser than the model of choreography as a structure. And it's to do with something that is so lived and so repeated and mapped so often and connects so strongly to memory and anticipation that it becomes a feeling. And that's how I experience choreography. And that is a form of embodiment.
So why, Jonathan, is the word, you said at the beginning that the word embodiment is not coming up in this research with Bojana Cvijić. Is there a particular reason for that, or is it just you're not there yet?
No, I think perhaps I'm consciously avoiding it at the moment because the word carries so much baggage that it becomes unhelpful in navigating the connections of ideas and experiences that I'm trying to navigate. So
it's interesting to me that you would, I mean, I completely understand that ambivalence, I guess, or reluctance to use a word like embodiment because it, as you say, it carries so much baggage. But it's curious that you would then, not that you're replacing it with it, but it's curious that to me that you're then using the word feeling. That it's not like that. We talk about feelings in the arts, and also particularly in the context of research, it starts to feel pretty. I guess I'll say woolly. I don't mean that necessarily in a pejorative sense of the word either. But.
Yeah, yes, good point. I'm quite into risking the woolly at the moment. I think it's something to do with age. And something to do with having navigated the difficulty of the woolly for so long. I find myself using the word spiritual in relation to the act of dancing. And you know what? I'm hearing a lot of people risk that bit of woolly at the moment. But maybe I should say that in terms of contemporary dance, my difficulty with the word embodiment is that even though I've been dancing, I started training professionally when I was 11, so 50 years ago. And for much of that time, I felt inadequate in that I've been surrounded by a culture which cherishes embodiment, and I've always felt that I wasn't embodying enough.
You weren't meeting the embodiment standards.
I wasn't meeting the embodiment standards. And that's a curious thing. And what it tells me is that it's very difficult to be consciously aware of embodiment. And so what I realize is that contemporary dance, I think, confuses two things. Contemporary dance confuses presence and embodiment.
Yes.
And I think the word embodiment is used to describe presence often, where it may not be the appropriate word. So for me, embodiment is also about forgetting and dissolving into something, which is what I experienced when I danced with other people, to bleed into the energy around me, a kind of act of letting go rather than hyper-focusing upon. And that's always been the place where I feel like I've caught glimpses of embodiment. And of course, there's the other aspect of contemporary dance, where contemporary dance claims expertise. But the expertise is very focused upon hyper-fit, youthful bodies. And as I've gotten older, like many people, I think I've rebelled against that. And I've thought, well, contemporary dance is not... Contemporary dancers are not always aware of the physical experience of people who are less fit, less physically confident.
Able-bodied.
Yeah.
Jonathan, that seems like, to me, a great place to finish on the things that we claim expertise and the things we can't claim expertise over. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you.